This is the part of the COVID-19 pandemic that is going to be the most serious, and it's the same with any other pandemic. It's the part before the end. Make no mistake, the pandemic is in the end stage, but around the world, it's going to affect different groups of people differently. So, yeah, and the reason we keep seeing new variants showing up is because globally, we are not getting vaccines out fast enough. In poor countries, they have little to no vaccine, and in those areas, many people want them, but they're not getting them. In rich countries and America, we have the opposite problem. We have a lot of vaccine, and everyone that wants one has gotten one, but everyone else hasn't. And in the US, your belief in scientific things follows along your political ideology. There's no real way to sugarcoat that. If you are a Democrat or an independent or a plethora of things, odds are you have gotten vaccinated or plan to do that very soon, which you should as soon as possible. If you're a Republican, same advice, but the odds that you have gotten vaccinated against COVID-19 and future outbreaks, if you survive this, are far less. In Minnesota, you have more DFL, that's the Minnesota Democratic Party's name, you have more DFL-leaning counties with higher vaccination rates. The highest are Cook, which is sort of a hippie community in the Arrowhead region, and Olmsted County, where the Mayo Clinic is. And then you have the metro areas, which are second, and then everyone else is behind that. If you go to Brainerd or Central Lakes, parts of the Iron Range, and the west part of Minnesota, you have vaccination rates from 40 to 60%, whereas in the metro, it's about 70% fully vaccinated, and Cook and Olmsted, they're approaching 80%. So, the metro, Mayo, and Cook County are effectively at herd immunity. But everyone is at an increased risk now, whether you're vaccinated or not. But if you have the vaccine, your odds of going to the hospital and dying are a lot less than if you refuse the vaccine. So, with all that in mind, my advice is the same as what the CDC is recommending, but for the whole country. Everyone should be wearing a facial covering in public to prevent droplets from spreading out and to other people. There's just a problem with that. A lot of Americans are extremely selfish, and they wear that with pride, so we can't really count on that happening. But if everyone who actually takes the pandemic seriously and wants to survive it wears a facial covering, you are going to be more likely to survive it. Especially if you're vaccinated. So we're back to where we were a year ago and people need to start wearing masks in public. Again, the problem is, in Minnesota, the governor no longer has the authority to issue a statewide mask mandate. He, I believe, will have to pressure the legislature to give his emergency powers back if I'm correctly understanding what I'm reading. Now, Governor Tim Walz got a lot of flack for shutdowns. And that was the most effective thing, just making sure people don't go to bars and restaurants and other public gatherings for a while. That made the infection and death rate drop sharply, and that did a lot more than wearing masks in public did. Because a lot of people really misunderstood how effective masks were. I mean, if everyone wore a surgical mask, like 100% of people, all the time, when they leave their homes, we would not really be having this discussion. Vaccination would kind of be a moot point. We might have had more time to, down the road, encourage people to get that. But that's not the case anymore. People absolutely need to get the vaccine if they want to have any hope of surviving like a year from now. And if people don't get the vaccine, there will be more new variants. I guess the best hope is the rest of the world getting inoculated really fast, so it puts a damper on new variants that are going to come out. Like, the Delta variant is as contagious as chickenpox. Now, I had the MMR vaccine, and so chickenpox is like a foreign concept to me and a lot of people in my generation. I also have autism, but I'd rather be autistic than be dead, though vaccines do not cause autism. Do not interpret it that way. So, yeah, there's that. But, yeah, the rest of this year, going into early next year, is going to suck, and a lot of people are going to die. And the vast majority of those people are going to be unvaccinated. There will also be a fewer number of vaccinated people dying. So, what then? Well, for unvaccinated people, it's basically this ignorance death loop that they're getting themselves into. More contagious strains are going to come out, and it'll hit them the hardest. Meanwhile, people who are vaccinated, who are actually interested in making rational decisions, are going to keep getting booster shots. So if you're against the COVID-19 vaccine for any reason, whether it's out of principle, just to make a statement or to get yourself attention, well, you're going to die. And I'm not really being hyperbolic here. Right now, hospitals are not overwhelmed. But in a few months, there are going to be a lot of people in Lake Country, in Arrowhead, and parts of West Minnesota getting helicopter rides to the metro and overwhelming our hospitals, which means a lot of mostly unvaccinated people here are also going to die. That 30-some% in the metro are like at the highest risk of dying right now from COVID. But no one should assume they're completely safe from the virus. Which is why right now I have an N95 on, but I'm really just testing this out to see how it works. I still got a bunch of surgical masks, and because we have smoke from Canadian wildfires in the Minneapolis metro at the moment, I also put P2.5 filters under them. Does that prevent completely the odds of me getting COVID? No, but it does give me more time in public before the virus can infect me. So yes, wearing masks in public, whether it's a surgical mask, a thicker cloth mask, not the neck gaiters, but those types of masks, or an N95, they will give you more time in public before you can be infected, with N95 giving you the longest amount of time, practically all day. But I'm not going to guarantee anything. The surgical N95s should be kept among healthcare workers. This is a so-called dust N95. It's almost as good as a surgical one, and that's, if you're going to get N95s, you should get this kind and not the surgical kind, unless you work in healthcare. But I'm starting to really think about what's going to happen with the economy and society at large going forward. Like, you have this cult of ignorance, people just doing contrarian things for attention and getting themselves killed because they would rather be dead than wrong about anything. And by dying, you are proving Democrats and people who are not Republicans right about COVID-19. Also, a lot of rural towns are just going to drop dead. So that means there's going to be a lot of job openings for things like farming and mining. But in order to get city dwellers out in those areas, they're going to have some better terms. And also, with cities generally being more intelligent than rural areas, I hate to make that generalization, but it's true. With city dwellers basically being drafted for rural areas so that cities can have resources to maintain themselves, those people are going to want more reasonable terms to work, and also they're going to have to find, and will find, more efficient ways to extract resources and farm our food, which we should have done that a long time ago, but better late than never. And with solid state batteries, that's, if we're going to point to anything that fixes climate change, it's going to be those, but we have to get those out as quickly as possible. But this isn't really so much about climate change, even though that can and will lead to future pandemics because of Earth frost thawing. But all that aside, the so-called labor shortage is going to end up getting worse. And if for politicians who are worried about the economy, I would just suggest give everyone a basic income, give restaurant owners some break from their expenses and rents, because we need to have another shutdown. And in Minnesota, it won't be statewide, and there will probably be people on the edge of the metro going to rural areas so they can go to restaurants and stuff. But that will just make things even worse for the rural areas when you go there and then come back. But all of that said, the governments need to help businesses that struggle by giving direct cash payments and forgiving their debts. And the economy at large should also be more like that in America. Just wipe the slate clean as much as possible so that we can have a more fair and perfect union. But that's going to take some time. Maybe a year, maybe a few years, though we need to start the process now. And if there is a case for having a monthly or bi-weekly basic income for people, this is the best time to do that, knowing that this more contagious Delta variant is going to put more people at risk and kill them. And maybe if people had a monthly stipend, they would be more willing to stay home when they need to. But people would have to cut their spending in general. The lights, the HVAC, that's important, but not going to bars and restaurants right now. If you need to shop, there's curbside, there's delivery. If you absolutely have to go to Target or Walmart or any basic essential store, just try and limit your time and only take what you need. And online shopping, good for you, bad for the people working for it. And we also should have the Defense Production Act make as many of this type of N95, the dust N95, as possible. They should be given out for free. People should just be told what to do and then given the tools to do it. And that probably would have happened in an administration that wasn't Trump, either Republican or Democrat, after a certain point. But now we had 2020. That happened. And people didn't get the tools and resources to do what they need to do in the U.S. and around the world. It varied by region, but for a while the pandemic essentially wasn't a thing in New Zealand because everyone did what they needed to do. This collective group effort, we can't really expect that in the U.S. Please wear a mask in public, regardless of your vaccination status. And if you're not vaccinated, get it now, as soon as you can, the first dose, and then go back for the second dose as soon as you can. that is my advice to Americans who are worried about the Delta variant. I got the vaccine back in February. I kind of jumped the line, but admittedly, we had some extra doses that were about to go bad, so either they were going to go in the trash or go into me at the time. But now, they're everywhere. You should definitely get them. And if you don't, you're almost certainly going to die over the next year or so. And you might not even make it to Christmas. And there will certainly be some ghost towns in the Ozarks and other parts of the country with similar vaccination rates. So, please, America, do what you need to do. And for those of you that are dying around you, I really don't know how to feel about people who are just choosing to die of ignorance rather than live enlightened and believing in science. Like, I mean, this is really cruel that people who are poor in poor countries and people who are ignorant are just choosing death, and they were kind of tricked into an ignorant sense of belief. Though I will say, people who fall for conspiracy theories involving COVID-19 and the vaccines and masks, they're inherently mentally gullible, and it doesn't necessarily define if someone will become a Republican or a Democrat, but it will define who is susceptible to believing extremist things. But regardless, do what you need to do as soon as you can, because the vaccines can take up to 3 months for them to be fully effective. Like 6 weeks after the second dose, that's when they get your body ready and boost your immune system and protect you from the virus. Almost nobody at this point who has died of COVID-19 was vaccinated, though those death rates are going to go up, case rates are going to go up. Please look after each other, even people you don't like, and do what you need to do. That's the Minnesota perspective on the Delta variant and COVID-19 going forward. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. And a year from now. And if you don't do what you need to do, then there's no chance of that whatsoever.